There are connections that stir us, and others that awaken something ancient and quiet, something we didn't even know was still alive. It's like looking into someone's eyes, and instead of getting lost, finally being found. That's when you begin to wonder, not with fear, but with awe. Could this be different? Could this be real? And yet, with the beauty of that feeling, often comes a quiet panic, a whisper of doubt that sounds like an old wound resurfacing. What if I ruin it? What if he doesn't feel the same? That's not your adult self speaking. That's the little girl inside you, still asking for permission to be loved. You've probably felt it before, the difference between wanting someone so much it hurts, and sensing a gentle peace that settles in your chest when it's mutual, when it's real. One is fire, the other is warmth. One burns, the other heals. Louise Hay once said, "We are never stuck, because every thought we think is creating our future. And when a man is truly meant for you, your body knows, your spirit knows. You don't feel the pull of desperation, you feel the expansion of freedom. But maybe you've been taught to chase signs, to read into every silence, to wait for a message, a gesture, a proof. And in that waiting, your nervous system learned to confuse anxiety with desire, to mistake the ache of longing with the power of love. You were never taught that real love doesn't scream, it doesn't disappear, it doesn't test you. It stays, quietly, kindly, deeply. That's why sometimes when it finally comes, you freeze, you question it, not because it's wrong, but because you've never known something so right, because the peace it brings feels foreign, and you start to wonder if you're enough for it, if you'll be able to hold it, if you'll push it away without meaning to. And here's the truth. You are not broken for feeling this. You're just remembering what safety feels like. And safety, for a heart that's been through storms, feels strangely unfamiliar at first. Marianne Williamson teaches that true love doesn't evoke scarcity. It evokes miracles. And what is a miracle, if not a shift from fear to love, a shift from old patterns to a new way of seeing? And when the shift happens, something opens. You begin to trust not what he says or doesn't say, but how you feel when you're with him. You begin to realize that the real sign is peace. The real proof is the absence of anxiety. The real love is the one that doesn't confuse your soul. Because not every connection is destiny. Some arrive as detours, some as lessons. But when it's truly meant for you, it won't come to complete you. It will reflect you, like a sacred mirror. Not because he holds your worth, but because you finally remembered it yourself. And that's when you know. Not because he said the right thing, not because you finally received the message you were waiting for, but because deep down, you stopped waiting. You aligned. You returned home to yourself, and love recognized you there, quietly, fully, undeniably. There's something strangely unsettling about love that doesn't hurt. It arrives like a calm after years of storms, and yet, instead of resting, you brace yourself. You wait for the silence to turn into absence, for the tenderness to turn into distance. You wait, because that's what life taught you, that love is a test, and safety is temporary. When the connection is kind, when he looks at you without agenda, without games, your heart doesn't leap with joy, it flinches, not because he's not right for you, but because you've been trained to expect abandonment, to mistake chaos for passion. When love finally feels right, it's your pain that feels misplaced, and that's when the doubt creeps in. You might ask yourself, why am I questioning this? Why can't I relax into something that feels so beautiful? And the answer is tender and painful, because part of you still believes love must be earned, still believes affection must be chased, still believes presence must be negotiated, and this part of you is not wrong. She's wounded. She remembers. She carries memories of giving too much and receiving too little, of showing up fully and being left anyway. That's why when peace finally arrives, your nervous system doesn't celebrate. It scans for danger. It searches for signs that this is too good to be true. And you, who have survived so much, find yourself afraid, not of being hurt again, but of being truly seen. Because being seen means being vulnerable, and being vulnerable has never felt safe. But what if this love isn't a threat? What if the silence isn't distance, but space? What if the gentleness isn't a prelude to pain, but a return to your natural state? What if, for the first time, love doesn't demand that you shrink, perform, or pretend? What if he's not the danger, but the mirror reflecting back your own readiness to be loved without fear? This is the wound of doubt. It whispers even in the presence of something real, but its voice gets quieter each time you stay, each time you breathe, each time you tell yourself, maybe I don't have to run this time. Maybe I can receive without needing to prove. And slowly, the fear unravels. Not because it was wrong, but because it was finally held. With patience, with awareness, with love. Somewhere along the journey, many women began to equate difficulty with depth. If it hurts, it must mean something. If it's complicated, it must be real. And if it flows easily, it can't possibly be love. This belief doesn't come from nowhere. It's born from years of trying to earn affection, of feeling unseen, of confusing emotional survival with emotional connection. There's a hidden script that says, if he truly matters, he'll make you wait. If he's the one, it won't come easily. And if you're struggling, it's because you care deeply. But love that wounds is not love that heals. And emotional chaos is not a badge of honor. It's often a sign that something inside is still trying to prove it deserves to be loved. Louise Hay said, "Love is the great miracle cure. Loving ourselves works miracles in our lives. But when you've been conditioned to believe that you must suffer to be loved, softness can feel suspicious. You might find yourself questioning the man who simply shows up, who listens, who doesn't trigger your insecurities. And in that moment, the fear isn't about him. It's about the part of you that doesn't believe she deserves love without sacrifice. So instead of leaning into the connection, you pull away, or you overanalyze, or you sabotage. Not because you want to lose it, but because some part of you doesn't believe it's yours to keep. That part still thinks love is a test you haven't yet passed. But love that flows isn't shallow. It's sacred. It doesn't rush. It doesn't demand. It doesn't make you feel small. It simply is. It shows up and lets you breathe. It invites you to stay present, not prove your worth. And that invitation, for someone who's lived in emotional scarcity, can feel terrifying, because it means rewriting everything. It means accepting that maybe, just maybe, you don't have to hurt to be loved, that you don't have to beg to be chosen, that you don't have to lose yourself to be wanted. And that kind of truth, it's not easy, but it's the beginning of liberation. There's a pattern that lives deep in many of us, a quiet, persistent pull toward the unavailable, the unpredictable, the ones who leave us guessing. It's not because we want to suffer. It's because, somewhere along the way, our nervous system learned to equate inconsistency with love, learned to chase instead of receive, learned that love was something to be earned, not something to rest in. You may find yourself longing for someone who barely shows up, who offers crumbs, but not presents. And still, you wait, you fantasize. You wonder if this is just how love is. You tell yourself, it's complicated, but it's real. And yet, the ache remains, not just for him, but for yourself, for the version of you that keeps trying to extract worth from someone who cannot give it. This isn't weakness. It's conditioning. It's the imprint of early wounds, of formative stories, of learned beliefs that whisper, if he hurts you, it must mean he matters. But pain is not proof of love. Suffering is not a sign of destiny, and chemistry fueled by absence is not the same as connection. The truth is, we are often most drawn to the people who mirror our deepest unhealed parts, the ones who awaken the ache, not because they're meant to complete us, but because they reflect what we still believe we have to fix. We confuse longing with destiny, but longing, especially when one-sided, is often just a reenactment of childhood wounds in adult clothing. Recognizing this doesn't mean blaming yourself. It means becoming conscious. It means seeing the pattern not as your fault, but as a call to awareness. Because once you see it, you can choose differently. You can begin to ask, do I want love that keeps me waiting, or do I want love that meets me where I am? It's a tender reckoning, to admit that sometimes what attracts us also breaks us. But it's also the moment of freedom, because you can't change what you're unaware of. And once you see the pattern, you no longer confuse pain with passion. You begin to understand that real love might not trigger your adrenaline. It might feel calm, simple, grounded, and that's not boring. That's safe. That's sacred. There's something profoundly healing about being loved in your wholeness, not for how well you hide, but for how courageously you reveal. And yet, many women were taught that love requires performance, that to be chosen, they must be pleasing, quiet, adaptable, that they must shrink their needs, soften their truths, and smile through discomfort. But Louise Hay reminded us, you know it's right when you feel safe being all of you, not just the polished version, not just the agreeable self, but the full, honest, vulnerable woman, the one who feels deeply, the one who has edges, the one who sometimes doubts and sometimes shines. When a connection is real, It invites truth, not perfection. You don't feel like you're walking on eggshells. You don't worry that being too much will scare him away. Because the right man doesn't fear your depth. He welcomes it. He doesn't demand that you dim your light. He adjusts his gaze to see you fully. In those relationships, you don't have to wonder if you're lovable. You feel it. In the silence, in the small gestures, in the way he holds space for both your softness and your strength. That's how you know. Not because he says the right words, but because you feel safe enough to say yours. Too often we've been praised for how much we can endure, for how well we can accommodate. But endurance is not the same as intimacy, and love isn't a role you play. It's a truth you live. When someone sees you and stays, not despite your depth, but because of it, that's love. That's home. And if that still feels unfamiliar, it's not because it doesn't exist. It's because you've been asked to hide for so long that safety now feels strange. But slowly, with presence and patience, you begin to unlearn the performance. You begin to trust that your truth isn't too heavy, that your vulnerability isn't a liability, that your wholeness is not a threat. It's the invitation. And love, real love, will always rise to meet it. Before your mind can explain it, before your heart can even name it, your body already knows. There's a language beneath language, the quiet intuition of your nervous system. It doesn't lie. It doesn't negotiate. It simply responds. And when something is off, it tells you. With tension in the chest, with a knot in the stomach, with restlessness that can't be reasoned away. So often we override these signals. We rationalize discomfort. We call anxiety excitement. We label fear as butterflies. But there is a difference, a profound difference, between love that feels alive and love that feels unsafe. One opens, the other contracts. One grounds, the other destabilizes. Many women have become so accustomed to emotional chaos that stillness feels suspicious. A man who's steady, present, emotionally available might not trigger the same rush, because the rush was never love. It was survival. It was your nervous system reacting to inconsistency, to unpredictability, to the possibility of abandonment. But when a man is truly aligned with your healing, your body exhales, your shoulders drop, your breath slows. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop scanning for signs of rejection. Instead, you begin to inhabit yourself. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything is clear. And clarity, after confusion, is a balm your body has been craving. That's the true compass. Not the fireworks, not the adrenaline, but the peace, the ease, the sense that you can finally just be, without calculating, adjusting, or performing. And yes, it might feel boring at first. Not because it is, but because drama has been your normal. And peace is something you're still learning to trust. Healing means listening to your body before your patterns. Not asking, does he like me? But rather, do I feel safe when I'm with him? Because safety is the soil where real love grows. Without it, everything becomes a performance. With it, everything becomes a home. At some point in the journey of healing, the questions change. You stop asking if he's interested. You stop scanning for signs, replaying every word, decoding every silence. Because the obsession with being liked begins to dissolve the moment you start liking yourself, not as an idea, but as a living, breathing truth. There is a moment, quiet and sacred, when you realize that love is not about being chosen. It's about being mirrored in your wholeness. And the most important question becomes, not, does he want me, but can I be fully myself in his presence? When a connection is real, you don't feel the need to shrink. You don't edit your truth. You don't dim your brightness in fear of overwhelming him. You feel free to take up space, emotionally, spiritually, energetically. You feel safe enough to exist in your complexity, without apology. So many women have been taught to mold themselves into who they think will be loved, to adapt, to anticipate, to bend. But love that asks you to disappear is not love. It's conditioning. And once you begin to return to yourself, something inside starts to resist that old shape. You begin to crave authenticity more than approval. That's when the shift happens. You stop performing. You stop pleasing. You start listening to your body, to your boundaries, to your joy. You begin to ask, do I feel seen when I'm silent? Do I feel honored in my softness? Do I feel like myself? Or a version of me that feels easier to love? And that shift, though subtle, is revolutionary, because it means the relationship is no longer about validation. It's about resonance. It's not about earning affection. It's about resting in presence. And the man who is truly aligned with your healing won't be drawn to your mask. He'll be drawn to your truth. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. There's a kind of love that feels like a storm, thrilling, consuming, full of lightning and noise. It takes your breath away, not because it fills you, but because it overwhelms. And for a long time, you may have mistaken that intensity for destiny, because it felt powerful, because it made your heart race, because it left you wondering and waiting. But there's a deeper truth that only emerges after heartbreak, after silence, after the exhaustion of giving yourself to what never really held you. The truth is, not all chemistry is connection, not all passion is peace, and not all sparks are sacred. When you've lived through emotional inconsistency, the nervous system can begin to associate chaos with love. You start to feel alive when you're unsure, when you're doubting, when you're chasing. And in that state of alertness, the body responds. Adrenaline rises, thoughts spiral, hope clings. But what it's calling love is actually survival. There comes a point, however, when you begin to tire of the storm, when you start to realize that the calm you once feared might actually be the love you've been longing for. A love that doesn't demand performance, that doesn't confuse you, that doesn't punish you with silence or keep you guessing. Real love isn't a riddle to solve. It's not a test of endurance. It's a steady presence. It's clarity. It's a soft place to land after years of bracing for impact. And when you finally feel it, the noise stops. The questions stop. The self-doubt softens. Because chemistry, without emotional safety, becomes chaos. But connection, true grounded connection, feels like peace. It feels like a gentle return to yourself. And that kind of peace is not the absence of feeling. It's the presence of truth. There's a sacred turning point in a woman's journey. It doesn't happen loudly. It doesn't come with fireworks. It arrives in stillness, often after another disappointment, another silence, another moment of feeling unseen. It's when the question shifts, not because the pain disappeared, but because something within you woke up. You stop asking, "Why doesn't he love me?" and begin whispering, "Why don't I love myself enough to stop needing this answer?" And that shift changes everything. Louise Hay once said, "I am willing to release the need to be unworthy." These are not just words. They are an act of spiritual rebellion, because for so long, you may have believed that love must come from the outside, that only when someone sees you will you be allowed to see yourself, that only when someone stays will you be worthy of staying. But the truth is gentler and far more powerful. You were never unworthy. You were conditioned to believe that love is something to earn, not something to embody. You were taught to pour into others, without remembering that you, too, are a well that must be filled. So when the shift happens, it's not about closing your heart. It's about reclaiming it. It's not about rejecting love. It's about no longer rejecting yourself. You begin to see that love is not just a destination. It's the way you choose to exist within yourself. And in that place, even if he never calls, even if he never sees you the way you long to be seen, you begin to hold yourself differently, more gently, more fully. You realize that the kind of love you once begged for has quietly begun to grow inside you. That is the moment of return, not to him, but to you. Waiting can feel like devotion, like loyalty, like love, but often it is a disguise for self-abandonment. You wait for the message, the shift, the realization on his part that you are always enough. And while you wait, something inside you pauses too. Your joy, your becoming, your breath. But when a man is truly meant for you, the journey doesn't feel like waiting. It feels like preparing. It feels like aligning. Not because you're passive, not because you're frozen in hope, but because your focus turns inward, toward healing, toward grounding, toward becoming the version of yourself who no longer needs to chase what's already hers. There is a difference between longing and readiness. Longing often lives in the past, or in the fantasy of what could be. Readiness lives in the now. It asks, am I showing up for myself the way I expect someone else to show up for me? It wonders, am I cultivating the kind of love within that I want to receive without? Louise Hay reminded us, every thought we think is creating our future. And when your thoughts are soaked in lack, in fear, in desperation, they don't create connection, they create longing. But when your thoughts soften into trust, into peace, into fullness, they begin to attract what matches that frequency. You stop needing signs. You stop obsessing over timing, because you realize that alignment isn't about controlling outcomes. It's about being rooted in your own worth, so that love, when it comes, finds you whole. And sometimes, alignment means letting go, not because he wasn't meant for you, but because the version of you who clung to him wasn't yet aligned with the love you truly deserve. There are people who enter our lives not to complete us, but to reveal us. Their presence acts like a mirror, not of what we're missing, but of what's already within us, waiting to be remembered. When a man is truly meant for you, he doesn't bring pieces to fill your emptiness. He holds up a reflection of your fullness, and through his eyes, you begin to see yourself more clearly. This kind of love doesn't demand that you become more. It invites you to return to what's already sacred in you. It doesn't ask for masks. It welcomes your truth, and in his reflection, you don't find perfection. You find peace. Not because he saves you, but because you've already done the saving yourself. So often we think of love as a solution, as the prize at the end of healing. But real love, the kind that mirrors the divine, doesn't arrive when you're fixed. It arrives when you're ready to be seen. And not just for your beauty, your giving, your light, but also for your edges, your grief, your wildness. The sacred mirror doesn't flatter. It reflects. It shows you the parts of yourself that still crave softness, the spaces that still long for approval, the habits that still seek validation. But it also shows you your courage, your clarity, your capacity to rise. And when you look into that mirror and see not just him, but yourself, grounded, radiant, whole, you know it's love. Because you're no longer looking for someone to complete you. You're recognizing the one who meets you. And the reflection that matters most is the one that reminds you of who you've been all along. There's a quiet truth that lives underneath every heartbreak, every unanswered message, every goodbye you didn't choose. And it's this: love isn't something you find. It's something you become ready for. And that readiness doesn't begin with someone else. It begins when you stop leaving yourself behind. Louise Hay once said, "I now choose to believe it is easy to make changes." And that choice, that shift in belief, is the foundation of everything. Because for too long, love may have meant losing pieces of yourself just to be enough for someone else. But real love doesn't ask for your silence. It doesn't ask you to vanish. It asks you to rise, to return, to be fully seen. Marianne Williamson teaches that the love meant for you will never ask you to shrink. It will call you to shine, even if that light unsettles everything you've been taught to dim. Because when the right one finally arrives, it's not to pull you out of your darkness. It's because you've already started walking yourself home. You stop needing closure. You stop begging the past to explain itself. You stop tying your value to how tightly someone else holds on. And in that stillness, you become the very love you were searching for. And then, something shifts. The right one doesn't show up to fix you. He arrives because you've already remembered your worth. Because you've become the kind of woman who no longer begs for crumbs, who no longer performs to be seen, who no longer waits to be chosen, because she already chose herself. So if he's truly meant for you, you'll know. Not through signs, not through struggle, but through peace. A peace that lives not in the future, but right here, in this breath, in this becoming. If this message touched your heart today, let it stay with you. Let it remind you of everything you already are. And if you feel called to keep walking this path of healing, of truth, of emotional freedom, you belong here. Subscribe, stay close, and remember, healing isn't a finish line. It's a remembering, a return to the woman you were before the world convinced you that you were too much or not enough. And if your heart is still whispering, still asking for more clarity, more compassion, more truth, there's another video waiting for you on this screen. It's not just a video. It's a continuation. A soft place to land. Click it when you're ready.